Okay, it's noon up, so I am going to go ahead and start the webinar now. Welcome, everybody. I'm Katie Brooks. I'm with the Bend Chamber of Commerce, and this week's webinar is on higher ed, namely Central Oregon Community College and OSU Cascades, our local favorites. And we're going to be talking today as number 3 of a 3-part series on education, childcare, and the world of learning and students in our region. As some of you might know, we started this off with the Bend Lapine Schools districts talking about K through 12. The last webinar was on how do we fill the gaps of childcare for before and after school, as well as 0 through 5. And then this week's focus is on higher ed. What are the plans for holding classes both virtually and in person? What about student housing? What does the future look like? And some of the procedures they're undergoing with COVID. It is a wild time right now in the education industry. And for all of you out there who are students or who have one living with you, our hearts go out to you because it's going to be a bit of a challenge this year. But I think that we'll all get through it. And hopefully we'll get this COVID thing under control soon enough. Before we start today, a couple of things. We want to thank our sponsor, Bend Broadband, for sponsoring all 3 of these series today. Without your help, we couldn't be putting these webinars on. We greatly appreciate everything that you've done in making this possible over the last few weeks. Thank you. Also, a couple of other things. Many of you have already heard, if you are a business owner and you're in need of funding assistance, the Bend Chamber is now taking applications. We have almost $1 million to give out of coronavirus relief funds. Our applications are on our website, which is www.bendchamber.org. And it's really easy to find. It's on the front page. Click on it, and the applications are fairly easy to go through. And we do encourage you to do that as quickly as possible. We've got another 2-3 weeks of taking these applications in, but we've been getting a lot of requests, so we look forward to hearing from you if you're in need of assistance. And finally, our hearts and minds are with everybody who is impacted by the wildfires across our state. It is horrific, the level of devastation that has happened and is happening as we speak. The Bend Chamber is putting together a couple of ways that you can give funds, donate your time and treasure to help folks who have lost their homes and their loved ones. For now, we're asking everybody to go to the Red Cross website. Central Oregon Red Cross is hosting the evacuation site up at the Redmond Fairgrounds, the Deschutes County Fairgrounds. So that's for interim, but in the coming day or 2, we'll also have other places where you can give that will get the money across the state as well. So you can go to the bendchamber.org and look at our social media channels, and we'll be getting that information out to you. So with that, I'd like to kick off today's webinar and welcome 2 esteemed guests. Lori Chesley is the president of Central Oregon Community College. This is her first year on the job, and we're thrilled to have her with us today. And also Becky Johnson. She's the vice president of OSU Cascades and has been a part of growing that university over the last several years since its inception, and has done such a great job in really bringing a 4-year college to the community as well. Both of them have a lot of great information to share with you. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session. I'll try and get to everybody's questions as best I can. Please use the Q&A button that is on your screen to submit your question, and we'll try and field them and get them answered for you. And with that, I'd like to invite Lori Chesley to be first up to share with us an update about COCC and what their plans are for COVID in the coming months. Go ahead, Lori, and welcome.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks to the Chamber and to Bend Broadband for sponsoring this 3-part series on higher education or on education throughout our region. We really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to be here. So before we get started with a few fall reopening plans, for those who may not know, let me share a few facts about Central Oregon Community College. We are the oldest community college in Oregon, having been founded in 1949, and we serve around 10,000 students a year in pursuing various paths. We serve the transfer function, so we offer the first 2 years of a 4-year degree, and then folks can transfer to places like OSU Cascades. We offer career and technical education programs, developmental education programs. We have robust continuing education programming as well that includes professional development as well as personal interest courses. Some of you may be familiar with the great work that our Small Business Development Center does. And as you know, we have campuses not only in Bend, but in Redmond, Madras, and Prineville. And we have robust online offerings, which have only become more robust in recent months. We are really founded on the dual mission of accessibility and affordability. We are here to say that we are open for business. We are ready to serve our community. And you'll get a sense in this presentation that that is going to be both serving virtually and serving in person. And so, Jen, can we go to the next slide? I'll speak a little bit about our evolving response to the COVID pandemic, speak in a little bit more detail about our plan for fall. We can talk a little bit about some of the impacts that various stakeholders are experiencing because of this pandemic. And then as Katie noted, some time for question and feedback at the end. And so I want to move on to our evolving response. What we have tried to do all along is, of course, follow the executive orders coming from the governor's office and follow the regulations coming from the Oregon Health Authority. And so our first concern is obviously health and safety of our campus and our community. But we're here to serve our community as well. And so within those parameters of the governor and the OHA, we want to serve students as much as possible. As I said, our mission is accessibility, is access, and we know that online learning is not for everyone. Different kinds of instruction require different modalities. And so we're still trying to be as open as possible to meet all the needs of our diverse students. At the end of the winter term, as you know, the governor issued an executive order requiring that higher education go to a remote modality, with the exception of a number of healthcare fields whose graduates would be needed to help address the COVID pandemic. And so that is, of course, what we did for all of our spring term. In summer term, which we are currently finishing up, we have been slightly more open per the governor's allowance, and we have focused on some face-to-face instruction in specific career and technical education areas where students were in a pipeline and needing to complete their programming in order to move into the workforce. So those additional areas where we offered lab classes were automotive, manufacturing, and aviation. As we move into fall, we plan to be a bit more open. The mix of classes that we will be offering break down approximately to 80% of them being remote and 20% being in person. The in-person classes that we're offering are primarily career and technical education courses. They are primarily labs. That includes some science labs. They are program required courses that cannot be offered in a remote format. So that is our focus. If it isn't a program required course that cannot be offered in a remote format, then we are offering that course remotely. We have decided to keep our residence hall closed and all of our student services remote. Our campus is closed to the general public, but we certainly are allowed to host some programming that would have an educational or community service purpose within the guidelines of the OHA. So closed to the general public, but still available for limited programming with an educational or community service focus. I am sure that anyone in our local education leadership group has struggled with all of the same kinds of decisions that we've struggled with here. They are not easy decisions to make, and it's difficult to always know what is the right thing. But again, our principles have been, of course, follow the law, and of course, follow Oregon Health Authority guidelines. Our plans for fall, it's important to note, do apply to all 4 of our campuses. We will reassess what we're doing for winter term, probably about 4 weeks before the start of that term. We are trying to give adequate notice to students and faculty in the community about our operational status, but we're also trying to wait enough time to make sure that we're making decisions that allow us within a health and safety context to be as open as possible to serve students' different needs. Our planning has been informed by the following factors, which are listed on the slide. And again, not easy decisions to make, but they are the decisions that we're all having to make now. Next slide, please. The impact of COVID has been significant, as it has on all areas of our society. On our students, we have done some surveying that shows that they are very, very happy with the way that the college and their faculty have outreached to them and communicated to them. But they are not terribly fond of online learning. And so we are taking, as an institution, a number of steps to try to improve our practice, improve our experience for our faculty and for our students. One of the questions Katie asked before this presentation was, do you have any advice for students out there? And I have always said, although of course I'm an advocate for our college, I have always maintained that different higher education institutions are the right choice for different students, and that everyone has a unique situation and needs to choose according to their own personal interests and their own personal situation. And I think that doesn't change in a COVID environment. Students need to think about their personal health and safety situation. They need to think about the programs that they're interested in and make the decision that's right for them. And they really also have to be, like all of us are finding, gritty and resilient, because education now is a different experience than we've ever faced before. And so grit and resilience are important for students, for the college, faculty and staff, and the community. There's a great deal of uncertainty out there, and there's certainly uncertainty for our college as well. Not surprisingly, the COVID pandemic has had an impact on our budgeting. We have furloughed and laid off some employees. We have stopped essential spending and hiring. And we've essentially assumed a much more conservative approach to our budgeting, which is in general quite a conservative approach. Our enrollment has been negatively impacted, although for fall, right now, we are about 4.5% down from last fall. We are grateful that the state has not reduced our state allocation, but we know that the forecast for future biennia is not a sanguine one. And so we're definitely preparing for this uncertainty. We're preparing for the very real potential of state funding cuts in the future. And frankly, the impact on enrollment is also uncertain. Typically, in times of high unemployment and a poor economy, community college enrollments increase dramatically because folks are coming back to upskill, to try a different career, to improve their situation. We haven't seen that yet for fall, and we haven't seen that yet given the poor economy. This situation doesn't look exactly like the recessions that we've seen in the past, but it's certainly possible that we will see a significant uptick in enrollment. We're also grateful for the CARES funding that's allowed us to adapt as an institution and allowed us to push out funds to our students to support them in a time of particular need. We have also, our faculty have had to adjust to remote learning, and very quickly, in a couple of weeks' time, we had to move to a completely remote environment, and that took a really, really heavy lift. Our staff, the vast majority, are teleworking, and that has also, as I'm sure it has been in your businesses, been a huge adjustment for us. And we are, although I love our gritty and resilient staff, there are obviously some morale issues to be addressed in this environment of uncertainty and such a different environment that we work in. The impact on our community. Katie asked specifically about how we see the pipeline to the workplace being impacted. I see that being that pipeline being somewhat delayed and negatively impacted because of the need to shut down businesses and to shut down the workplace. And I think anecdotally, we know that quite a number of students are making personal decisions that online learning isn't for them. So they're going to take some terms off, or their home situation, their childcare situation, their own health situation is causing them to say, let's take a term off or take a couple terms off. How great that impact on the pipeline will be is pretty difficult to assess at this point. And of course, also related to that is the factors of the economy and enrollment that I talked about earlier. Obviously, some impact on the community is that we're not able to do the degree of arts and culture programming that we have done in past years, or that has moved to a virtual format. And so how have we adapted? Well, here are some photos of some creative faculty, some of the health and safety measures that we're having to take, the distancing. I love the faculty member with a GoPro on his tool. He's one of our great geology faculty. I am really, really proud of the grit and the grace that our faculty and staff and our students have shown throughout this situation. And so final message before questions or feedback. we're here for you. We're here for our community, whether that's virtually or in person. We are open. Thanks for your time, and I'll look forward to questions later.
Great. Thanks so much for all of that. Sorry about that, Lori. And hoping that things can get back to normal as quickly as possible. We're going to hold the questions until the very end. So I want Becky Johnson to go ahead and present what OSU Cascades is doing. Becky, again, is the VP of OSU Cascades, and we're really glad you're here today. Becky, go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. It's good to see 54 participants, I think, are here. I can't see any of you, but glad that you joined us today. And thanks to Ben Broadband for your sponsorship. I would like to cover a little bit about what OSU Cascades is doing now and how we're going to move into fall term. So Madeline, if you can go ahead and start my slides.
Are you guys seeing them?
Nope.
Okay. But now.
There we go.
Awesome.
So I want to just start by saying we're really focused on academic excellence and student success. The goal is to keep students on track to graduate and get into their careers. And we know that they're all struggling with different things as a result of the pandemic, and of course now the fires and everything else surrounding that. But we are going to stay laser focused on student progress as we go through this year. So next slide, please. Like COCC, our campus is open, probably a little bit more open than COCC is, but also it's not open to the public. We will have card key access on all of our buildings, but students, staff, and faculty can go into any of our buildings. And unfortunately, we can't have the public coming into our dining center like we have in the past. So we will regret having visitors to campus like we used to, but hopefully we can invite you back soon. So next slide, please. Our enrollment actually looks pretty good right now. This is a graph of enrollment since we started basically back in 2001. So we had 1,311 students last fall. We think we'll be just slightly up from that this fall. We have a particularly strong response in freshmen and transfer students, but every year we have a big graduating class that we have to replace. And so weighing those two factors, we think will be pretty close to where we were last fall. So that's a good thing from both a budgetary perspective and also for serving our community. What we're seeing is that a lot of students who were planning to go away to college are now staying here in Central Oregon and at least starting their career here. We hope to give them such a great experience that they decide to stay for all 4 years. Next slide. We do have some new degree programs coming on this fall. We're going to have a degree program in outdoor products, which will be a combination of engineering and business principles applied to the outdoor products industry, and a new degree in engineering science, which will start students off with 2 years of common basic engineering discipline, and then they can, in their junior and senior year, decide to go into mechanical, electrical, or industrial engineering and specifically focus on those areas. Next year, we'll start a doctorate of physical therapy program, but we are now open for applications to that program. Really excited. That'll be our first doctorate program at OSU Cascades. So next slide, please. On the campus development front, we're moving ahead. We are transforming a mine and a landfill into a vibrant university, and this has been called one of the most innovative university projects in the country. In the foreground there is the former pumice mine, and in the background is the former landfill. And we have been making progress on this probably over the last year. So next slide, I'll kind of show you where we are on that. I took this screenshot from our webcam yesterday. So you can see this is the pumice mine looking from east to west. So Chandler is on your left and Mount Washington Drive would be in the distance there. And you can see that we have flattened the slopes of the former pumice mine. And on this end of the pumice mine, we brought it up nearly to grade, and then it will go down in a gentle slope toward the west there. You can see that we're into our next academic building, which is right now called Academic Building 2. It will have a name at some point in the future, but we're 2 floors into that. It'll be a 4-story building. It is being done with mass timber. So we're very excited to be able to demonstrate a 4-story mass timber project here in Central Oregon. Next slide, please. This is the view from the main floor looking out to that pumice mine, and you can see the warm effect that you get from a mass timber building from inside. Those beams are not curved. That's just a function of the camera lens that was used. But you can see the laminated beams and posts and beams and ceiling will all be mass timber. So next slide, please. This is what the building will look like when it's finished. This has been taken from the pumice mine looking back toward our existing campus. So Tykeson Hall would be right behind this. And again, you can see that the ceilings and the timber, the mass timber, gives it also a warm look from the outside as well. This building will be net zero in energy, have a geothermal system that's going to help with heating and cooling, and have solar panels on the roof. So next slide. So in terms of fall term, we will be demonstrating physical distancing. That means that our rooms basically are at half capacity. We will require face coverings for all students, staff, and faculty when you're on campus. Any kind of social gathering by students has to be limited to 10 people or less. And we expect 50%, actually maybe even 60% of our classes to either be hybrid or in person, with the other 40 being completely remote. But our students do have a remote option for every class. So the top picture there shows the spacing, the 6-foot spacing that you would see in a classroom come this fall. And the bottom picture was a demonstration of our faculty members testing out a system where you're teaching the class to the person that's sitting there. And at the same time, you have all your remote participants on your Zoom screen. And you can see that this is going to be a challenge for faculty to try to pay attention to both formats there. But we wanted to make sure that any student who couldn't come to campus for whatever reason would not be jeopardized in terms of their progress toward graduation. Next slide, please. Oh, I wanted to show you, before you start that, I just wanted to show you the creativity of our faculty as they plan for these hybrid classes. This is a class that will probably only meet face-to-face 3 times, and the rest of the time the students would be working remotely with a faculty member. So go ahead and run that.
Hi, I'm Matt Orr, and I'm the instructor for aquatic entomology this fall at OSU Cascades. And this is just a quick video to let students who are enrolled in the course or students who are thinking of enrolling in the course know a little bit more about what they might expect this fall under the COVID guidelines.
Okay, so some of the stuff you'll be doing on this course is you'll be spending a lot of time, of course, in aquatic settings, trying to find bugs. That's the aquatic part and the entomology part. And this is our TA, Robert Casey. And he's just going to give you a quick kind of glimpse of the type of thing you'll be doing once you get out into stream or pond habitats. So each of you will be issued a D-net, and you'll get a chance to you know, scrub rocks, you kick the soil.
So sorry about that. It looks like the video isn't going. You can hear the audio, but basically students are going to be issued you know, nets to go out and collect bugs and insects out of streams. Every student will get a microscope that they take home with them. They'll get vials to collect their samples that they will then, they have a connection for the microscope with the cell phones. You put your cell phone on the microscope, allows you to capture what you're seeing, send it back to the professor. And so basically they've gotten very creative in how to even do a field course almost entirely with remote instruction. So this video is on our Instagram page, so I'll just encourage you to go to our Instagram page and take a look at that. So next slide, please. In terms of living on campus, our residence hall is open. It's at half capacity because we're requiring only 1 student per room. We do have set aside a number of isolation rooms in case there is an outbreak. When they come here this fall, in about a week and a half, we will stagger them as they check in. We will test them all as they check in. They won't be able to enter their rooms until we get the results of those tests back. In terms of the common areas in the residence hall, we're requiring physical distancing. So basically we've taken out, half of the chairs and places where people would be sitting to make sure that they don't congregate in large groups. We only have takeout dining. You can sit in the residence hall with your takeout meal, but you again have to stay physically distanced. And our fitness center, which is part of our residence hall, will be open, but with limited capacity. So next slide, please. We want to make sure that students stay engaged while they're going to school this fall. We do ask students if they want to take a trip prior to starting their classes this fall. We have a Headwaters program. They can go on canoe trips or backpacking trips or whitewater trips. We're finding those are fully subscribed. Students want to come here and get to meet their fellow students. Our student clubs will stay active. Our Cascades Adventures will run trips throughout the fall term. In all of those cases, the cohorts will be less than 10 students and they will be following all the public health guidelines. And all of our student services such as advising, counseling, financial aid, careers, internships, all of those will continue throughout the fall, both remotely and with some face-to-face. So next slide. We are doing some robust testing and contact tracing. You may remember when Trace came to Bend a few weeks ago and did random testing for COVID-19 throughout the community. That photo on the bottom was that whole Trace team that mostly came from Corvallis. 20 vans came over here, did random testing throughout the city. So now we will have something called Trace OSU at all of our campuses. So in Bend, they're going to test 350 students every 2 weeks. And we will have continual wastewater monitoring from our sewage pipes on campus so that we can detect any spikes in COVID throughout the term. Our students can access telemedicine through the health center over in Corvallis, and all of these things are being coordinated with Deschutes Public Health. Next slide, I think might be my last one. So just want to reiterate that we're trying to keep everybody on track to graduate, trying to keep everyone employed at OSU Cascades. We have had to do some salary reductions, but very few and layoffs at OSU Cascades, keeping people working and keeping our students headed toward the future workforce. So with that, I will take questions with Lori.
Great. Well, thanks to you both. We've got the first question in the queue is, are students able to take placement tests on campus? I think, Lori, this is probably more toward you. If not, how does that look currently for the upcoming semester?
All of our placement testing is available online. It's available virtually. So again, all of our student services are available virtually. If a student needed some sort of accommodation around testing, ADA accommodation, our ADA office is also available, and they should be contacted and we would figure out the right solution.
Great. And Becky Johnson, same for your placement tests. Are things online or are you doing a hybrid?
I believe everything is online. I think are you talking about math placement tests and English placement tests?
Yes, in general.
Yeah, I think in general, those can be taken online and always have been able to be taken online.
Great, thank you so much. So I've got a few questions here. The first one is hearing a lot of talk about housing. So here's what I do know about college students. They like to hang out together and they like to be in the town where they're taking their classes. Are you hearing, both of you, on creative or some of the decision making that's happening with students on where they're finding housing? Are they coming to campus to be just physically close? Do you know if that's happening out in the community? And Becky, you also mentioned that your dorms are half full, but I'm pretty sure you'd fill those up if you didn't have the restrictions. So Becky, why don't you start, and then Lori, I'd love for you to chime in as well.
Sure. So great questions. 60% of our students come from Central Oregon already. And so a lot of them, of course, are living here and don't need to look for housing. The ones that come from outside this area are incredibly creative in finding housing in a market where we all think housing isn't available. Somehow they're finding places to live. We are full. Our residence hall is 300 beds, so 150 are in there already, and we have a waiting list. And I will say that in Corvallis, they have found the occupancy rates are up around 80%, even though they're doing 90% of their classes online. So they're expecting 10,000 students to still come back to Corvallis, even though their classes are going to be almost all remote. And it's because of just what you said. This is the college experience, right? They want to be on campus and be in the town where their friends are. And unfortunately, that's where the outbreaks happen. The outbreaks are not going to happen in a classroom where you're 6 feet apart and everybody is wearing a face covering. And what we have more difficulty controlling is what those students are doing in their off hours. OSU does have a policy that that students are supposed to be following the guidelines of no more than gatherings of 10 people, even off campus. And so if we find that a student is engaging in behavior that endanger the health of other students or faculty or staff or the community, we can approach that as a student conduct issue. And of course, we're trying our best to use social norms and peer pressure to never have to do that. But we've seen it happen around the country at other universities, mostly big universities. This is why we feel more comfortable about having more of our classes face-to-face, is that we are quite small. And in a town like Bend, where we're getting 15,000 tourists coming here every summer day, adding a couple hundred university students in the fall is just a drop in the bucket.
Great, thank you. Lori?
We know that quite a number of the students who want to live in our residence hall come from, are not local. And so we have personally outreached to every student who had wanted to live in the residence hall and could not. We've been able to help a number of them secure housing locally. Our culinary program, interestingly, is working with their culinary ambassadors in our community to see if we can house some of those students, those program students, in their homes. And we've had some success there. We know that our decision to not open our residence hall has impacted our students negatively, some of them. We're working to ameliorate that situation for them and to get them here, if at all possible. But in our situation, we didn't feel that that was the right decision for us to make as a college. And you know, as Becky and I both acknowledge, it's a difficult choice to make. And we hope that we'll have our residence hall open in winter.
Yeah, I hope so too. Okay, next question. We're seeing that the remote workforce, people working remotely is shifting. We all know that there's a great deal of folks out there working remotely. I think Bend is now the latest numbers are out, the 5th most remote working communities in the United States. And so as we see this trend happening, and also in schools, there's also that need to connect with people, to be with people. So as you shift to this online platform or hybrid platform, what things can the colleges do, COCC and OSU Cascades, to safely, I guess, for the short term, create some sense of community? You want to go first, Lori?
Sure. Well, this is a struggle, and it's a journey we're on. So we don't have all the answers to that dilemma. But some things that we've done, we've created some trainings for our supervisors that we're rolling out. And some of the topics are specifically team building in a remote environment. We just yesterday had our annual fall kickoff program, virtually, of course. And some of the sessions offered were how to build team in a remote environment, how to how to improve communication. So we're certainly looking at best practices that we can find and trying to implement them. We've worked very hard here on frequent and redundant communication so that people get the information they need and feel like somebody's out there. Our leadership teams have done a number of things that are creative in terms of video outreach and virtual forums of Q&A. So these are some of the things that we're trying, but I'd love to hear great ideas that might come from our audience, because I think it's something we're all struggling with.
Yeah, and you have such a ginormous campus. And seriously, there's a physical distancing.
In some ways, we're so separated anyway. Maybe it's not as big a shock to us, but all kidding aside, it is a real challenge.
Yeah. Dr. Johnson, how are you handling that over at OSU Cascades?
Well, a lot of the similar things that Lori said, and communication is really key. We are fortunate that we are trying to do a lot of things in person still. Again, with 60% of our students being from Central Oregon, they were living here in the spring when we were 100% remote, but we still try to have some activities, again, following public health guidelines, but some activities where they could come together, whether it was their student clubs going rock climbing or whatever, but doing everything with face coverings and social distancing. We find on the classes themselves that some of them work really great and you can get that engagement. Usually they're smaller classes. Other faculty have said that the students are all turning off their cameras. So the faculty, all they're seeing are the names of the students and they're not getting any engagement at all. My response to that is, that, gosh, maybe you should require them to leave their cameras on and maybe you get more engagement, but it's hard, right? You've all been in a meeting before where you want to turn your camera off because you want to check your mail or do whatever. And so it is a challenging situation for faculty, and I really admire how they've stepped up. But the response has been different for different situations. Some of them have found better engagement in the remote class, and others have found it's been really difficult. But I am fortunate that we are trying to continue as many of our extracurricular activities as possible as we go through here.
Yeah, thank you. So there's another question in the queue that we also fielded when we had our discussion with the Ben Lapine School District and elsewhere that I've heard as kind of an ongoing theme. So not everybody has equal access to the internet. There are some folks who might have some disadvantages socioeconomically or whatever their situation is. And on top of trying to figure out how to deliver everything, or most things online, there's that added challenge of bringing in people who may not have access to what a lot of others do. So how are each of you approaching servicing students that may not have access to internet or have other special needs? And Becky, why don't you start?
Sure. In terms of special needs, we do have a disability access services unit that will make accommodations for students, and this happens COVID or not COVID. But on the internet in particular, we had a pretty good supply of laptops that were used in classrooms, and we are allowing students to check those laptops out for free if they don't have access to a laptop to use for remote instruction. And we're also helping them if they don't have internet connection. How do we get a hotspot on their phone so that they can access the internet and then be able to access their classes? Because our classes are going to be a mix of hybrid and face-to-face and remote, we know that some students are going to come to campus for a class and then maybe their next class is going to be remote. So where do they sit? How do they connect? You know, so we're setting aside some classrooms that will be just for students who want to get on the internet, but they're not in a face-to-face class. And so we have classrooms that have full Wi-Fi connections. Again, we would have laptops available for those students as well. So both on campus and off campus, we're doing everything we can to make sure that they have access to remote classes.
Great, thanks. Lori?
At Central Oregon, we're doing some of the same things. We've always maintained one open computer lab on each of our campuses throughout the COVID pandemic, and we'll continue to do that. We're also going to fund some library Wi-Fi hotspots within our library, funded through our COCC Foundation. We are part of a grant application to some of the funds will be used to expand broadband access in the parking lots at our Redmond and Prineville campuses. And so we're hopeful for that grant. We serve on a newly formed Jefferson County Broadband Commission to work on our access there in other ways. We're actively pursuing other grants. I referenced earlier a survey that we did of our students related to what they're experiencing during the COVID pandemic. And it was interesting. We have some students who struggle with the actual hardware, do I have a laptop? Do I have a computer? But the biggest concern by far was access to reliable Wi-Fi. So we thought that was a pretty interesting finding that we're definitely trying to work on and improve.
Great, yes, I've heard that too, about the Wi-Fi access from many sources. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit and ask a question about finances. So we know the Higher Education Coordinating Committee is meeting, talking about how to allocate a shrinking pot of money, and also being a part of a state that's highly, just like the rest of the nation, highly impacted by the COVID economic downturn. So two questions, and you can choose which part or both to answer. So the first is, what do the prospects look like, let's just say the short term, for funding some really key projects on both campuses that we know are in the works? And then what will the student experience be like in maybe the cost of going to school in the coming years in the short term? If you have any insights on that, this is going to be a situation that's going to be pretty tough for higher education institutions across the country. And I know we're not exempt from that. So if you could share your thoughts on your plans for expansion and some of the great work that you're doing and what students might expect in the short term. Dr. Johnson, do you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. So on the physical aspect of our campus, we've been trying to get funding for our Student Success Center for four different sessions now. Thought we might get it in July and we weren't on the list. So we're really hoping that in the 2021 session, legislative session, that we will be at the top of the list for getting for that. And as a reminder, our students have taxed themselves in student fees to pay $5 million of this project. And that should carry a lot of weight with legislators, but so far we haven't been successful. I really hope we will be successful. Any of you that would like to help us lobby for that in the 2021 session, be happy to take you to Salem or get a letter from you of support. That would be helpful. The other thing is we have an innovation district we'd really like to develop on our campus. Unfortunately, it's in a landfill that needs to be cleaned up. So there's some costs associated with that that we don't have. We don't think the state will probably come forward with the funds for cleaning up the landfill, but I'm hoping with all the talk about recovery funding federally that maybe there will be some infrastructure funding that comes available at the federal level that we could secure some of that for brownfield remediation. So on the same topic, if any of you have connections with our federal lawmakers, put in a good word for us there and see if we can get some of those funds. We are continuing to invest in our new programs like our outdoor products, engineering, science, DPT. We don't want to be in a situation where we're not well positioned to come out of this. And so we know that there are key programs that students want to enroll in, and we want to be ready to be offering those. So we don't want to just cut our way into being in a bad position once things turn around. On the tuition side, we're holding tuition steady for this coming year. And of course, we won't set tuitions for the following year until we see what the budget situation is. The state did continue to fund us at the same level as last year, which was way better than we were expecting. So that was good to get us through the 2021 session. But they've indicated they're unlikely to do that for the next biennium. And we're expecting maybe an 8% decline in state funding in each of the 2 years of the next biennium. So that has to be taken into account when we set our tuition. Tuition increases over the past 10, 15 years have been tied to the fact that the state has not been keeping up with the share of funding that they used to in the past. And unfortunately, that means students have to do that. K-12 doesn't have the option of raising tuition. And so when state lawmakers are trying to decide how to allocate those funds, they always say, well, you can just raise tuition so you don't need the money. And so hopefully we will be able to get through that without too big a cuts to state funding.
Thank you.
At COCC, we in the past year raised tuition only to the extent that the CPI had gone up. And so our hope and our goal is to keep tuition very affordable at the college. And when we raise it, to only look at increases in the cost of doing business as the factor that determines that. We were allocated several years ago, and these funds still remain, capital funds for a building in Redmond, for which we will be seeking matching funds. That still remains in the state budget. We, like OSU Cascades, have a strong concern that our state allocations remain intact, that the Oregon Promise program for our students stays intact. We have a long tradition at our college of conservative fiscal management, and that continues to be a goal. So we take a very conservative approach, as I said, to hiring, to spending. We are also absolutely open to new programming. But what our challenge will largely be in the coming years is around reallocation of existing resources and realignment of those resources with the changing needs of the community and the workplace. And so those will be ongoing discussions. We would have had them anyway, even without COVID-19. But COVID-19 certainly gives us greater impetus and greater urgency to have those kinds of discussions.
Great, thanks to you both. There's a question in the queue. It's specific to, Lori, I think this is probably for your programs. Schools restricting or allowing any degree in-person internships, this in particular for mental health students, practicum placements. But I'd like to expand it also a little bit more to both of you of the internship programs that I know both of you run out of your institutions. Could you comment on that? Go ahead, Lori.
And the specific question is, are we doing those in a remote environment?
Are you restricting them at all? or allowing internships?
We have been allowing internships. Yes. Yes is the answer.
All right.
Yeah,
Great.
and we're continuing our internship program. It's as robust as it can be, with remote connections, and obviously depends on whether the employers have internships for our students to go to. And I'm sure that a lot of Central Oregon businesses have been impacted to where they can't hire an intern where they used to be able to hire one in the past. But in particular, you mentioned counseling. We do have a counseling clinic and a counseling degree at OSU Cascades, and we will continue to run that clinic. It's for low-income people that can come in and get family counseling at OSU Cascades. And at the same time, it is offering the clinical hours that our students need to be able to get their degree. So that will continue, again, completely within public health guidelines.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I want to close with this last question for both of you. If you were a parent or a student looking at starting school, what is your advice to stay on track, to stay healthy, and to get a satisfaction level out of your first year or this year's university or community college experience? And whoever wants to go first.
You're pointing at me. Well, I referenced earlier that I think you really have to look closely at your own personal situation. What are your long-term goals, and what is perhaps the unique health and safety situation of your family and yourself? So some of the same factors that would cause you to choose one college over another are the same ones impacting now, and then you add an added layer of health and safety. I really believe, and my best advice, this is the time for grit and resilience and to embrace the challenge. Going off to college or starting college after a break, those are challenging enough tasks in any time. Embrace it. COVID is going to change our world in the long term. So you might as well jump in now, embrace it, follow the rules, follow the guidelines, please. We know that sometimes younger folks have an air of invincibility. I love that spirit. I love that can-do spirit, but follow the rules. So grit and be safe.
Great.
I'd say is don't spend $60,000 to have remote instruction at an East Coast school when you can stay at home, either COCC or OSU Cascades, for a lot less money.
I was wondering when you guys were going to bring that up.
But it really comes down to behavior too. You can keep yourself safe and still have interactions with people. And so if students will wear their face coverings, if they will be careful in their off-campus activities, they can have a relatively normal college experience with some face-to-face components and still keep themselves safe and keep others safe around them. So I'm really hoping that students will take that very personally and as their personal responsibility as they come back to college.
Great. Great advice. Dr. Becky Johnson, OSU Cascades, and Lori Chesley from Central Oregon Community College. I want to thank both of you again for showing up today, sharing all this great information. For those of you who may not have been able to see the entire broadcast here, we'll put it up on the website. It'll be accessible for you to watch at any time. And again, our thanks to Ben Broadband for sponsoring this 3-part series on education and childcare. And I hope all of you stay safe. Let's keep those who have been impacted by these wildfires in mind. And if you have the wherewithal to pitch in to try and help out. And good luck to everybody who's starting your classes. Best of luck, get out there, wear your face coverings, and hope you're going to OSU Cascades or COCC. Thanks everybody for joining us. Bye now.
Thank you.